Hello, this is Chris Ott again, and I'm going to do an addendum to Part 9 to make some things clear that were not clear. I've been wanting to speed up this series and to get to other things, and I tried to put too much into that one video, and I didn't spend enough energy making certain things clear. So I'm going to try to clarify those. So I watched it last night and I was sort of appalled. Started out good, and then some things just didn't come across. So let me go over them again. And I have more visual aids here to make them clear. So the first thing that might have confused an audience is when I was talking about cutting up a can of Spam, which was kind of funny in itself. It was meant to be. The Spam represented the brain. Now, what was the point of this? You know, maybe to some it was clear, but watching it, I thought, you know, this could be very obtuse for people. So let me say what I was trying to convey. I have a theory, and I might be wrong about this. I've speculated, you know, what is this external world based on? What does it come from? Why has it lasted so long? Why is it so, permanent, and vigorous? And where did it come from at all? Actually, my daughter, I was talking to her. She's 24. She lives in New Jersey, and we were talking about this, and she said, well, where did they get this idea of the external world? And then I was trying to tell her, and this was one of my ideas of the intuition that it's kind of based on, and the mistake in that misapplied intuition. The idea that I was trying to convey is that in all history, we've always thought of our experience as something that's happening in our body, inside us, okay? So I said the Greeks thought it was like in your chest, that's where you had emotions and where you experienced things. And then later that moves to the brain, okay? So we still have this idea of our experience being in our head, all right? Well, I say that this is a projection of something that's in the things that we experience being projected upon its cause. Because I say that doesn't really make sense that experience or consciousness is in your head. It's not that kind of thing. It's not a phenomenal object. That's what the point of the brick. It's not like something that's in something. So I cut open the Spam representing a brain to give the sense of the absurdity of looking for your experience in a pile of fat. Okay? That was the point of that. So my thought was that because people have thought their experience is in them in some way, like in their head or in their heart or in their brain, it sort of felt kind of intuitive that there must be a real world outside of your head or your heart or your brain. Okay, that's causing it. It's kind of reasonable. And this is where you get your external world. It's originally in contrast to your internal experience. Okay? However, it doesn't really work because your head or your brain or your heart, they're all in the phenomenal world. So the idea that the phenomenal world, meaning the experiential world, is in your head, I say, well, that's ridiculous because your head is in the world. So how can the world be in your head and your head be in the world? And this creates an infinite loop, and it's because of a reasoning mistake, which is called the historical fallacy, which is taking something from the the product of some process, like inness, which comes about as a dimension of the phenomenal experience we're trying to explain, and then takes that sense of in and outness and applies it to our account of the cause. Like, part of our account of the cause is, you know, you have your thoughts in your brain. You see, it's a logical fallacy. Now, maybe I didn't make that any clearer, but that's what I was trying to convey. And it's not that important. And in the liner notes under this video on YouTube, anyway, I clarified that this isn't that important. It's just a thought that I've had, and I might not even be right that that's a factor in the external cause feeling, the external world theory. But that's my one theory of its genesis, is that it comes from the idea that your experience is in your head, so there's something outside your world outside your head. Okay, now I also I gave an analogy. I said, now a bunch of people, they walk in a room and there's a guy playing piano. Now, once again, we all are taught to speak, at least, as if your experience of the guy playing the piano is in your head. And after all, the sound goes in through your ears, and the color goes in through your eyes into your head, and so that's where the experience takes place. So if two people come in and they see a piano player, each one of them has his experience in his head, see? So John and Linda, they walk in a room, they're watching this piano player, and John is having his experience in his head as he's watching. So it's supposed, not by me, but that's always sort of the way it's been looked upon. And Linda, she has her experience in her head. So you have two piano players, see? And the one in his head, the one in hers, that's the experience of it. And so if that's what they're experiencing, if what they're experiencing is the piano player, if John's experiencing the piano player in his head, and Linda's experiencing the one in her head, well, there must be some common piano player because they're both seeing identical piano players. So this is where you get your second world theory, your external world. See, you perceive your internal experience, so you infer from it that there must be some cause and there must be something outside your experience. Okay? So this is the notion of the external world, okay, in juxtaposition of your experience. The problem is, the modern problems that boggle the minds of our greatest minds all come from this theory. The most problematic dilemma in philosophy is called the mind-body problem, and that's the question of how does this piano player cause your experience here, you know? And talking about chemicals and electricity firing in your brain does not solve the problem, because we're not talking, it's too much to get into. The mind-body problem is caused by this paradigm. So I do away with it, but I was trying to express where the intuition comes from, that there's some unseen theoretical external world. It's the looking for some common cause for our common experience. You know, some of our experience is not in common. Some of it's private, like my fears and my thoughts and my emotions, my memories. Those are all just in me. But a lot is shared, too. So if you go to a concert, there's a lot of shared experience there. And so we need to account for this shared experience. That's why we have an external world theory. Okay, so let's go to the next. I offer an alternative. And in this alternative, you don't need an external world. And I want to point out something else, too, because we solved this problem, too. You notice that in this paradigm, which is the prevailing paradigm, but since Aristotle, still is, John and Linda are not perceiving the real world. They're not perceiving the real piano player. They're not experiencing him, at least directly. Instead, they're experiencing their private experience of him, and then they infer from it his existence. But so they don't perceive him directly, they perceive sort of a representation of the real world. So the real world becomes theoretical. It's strange, but that's true. As a matter of fact, matter in philosophy is a theoretical entity. Not in my theory, but in the current immaterialism. Okay, so let me go on. So now we replace this idea with a theory of perception itself evolving, and it evolves by developing new and newer ways of organizing experience. And originally, it's not organizing the experience of something; it's potentially organizing the experience that will come along. And you have these perceptual schemas, ways of organizing experience, and these evolve, and then you evolve individually here as a kind of lens. So the actual witness of everybody's experience is all one. That's the sense I was getting at, that we're all one. It's not located anywhere, it actually produces the very impression of location, which it achieves once it becomes an individual. So the individual who appears to be perceiving through his own individual lenses, which we all have our own conditioning that we perceive through, he arises in this process, and this is why you have some of his experience is shared or in common, because it forms here, and then as he evolves, he has individual impressions which give it its individuality. Because we all, somebody will come watch the piano player, and we'll all see the piano player, but one person will say he stinks, and another will say, he's a maestro. It's because we have different individual lenses. This will be clearer in my book. There'll be a lot of pictures. Now, here I'm trying to show the same thing. The individual arises in the process, the many of us. But it all starts from perception before it is divided that way. And perception never really divides, it appears that way. It's appearance. It's phenomenal, but it's not actual. So here we find ourselves in the world, looking through our own individual cultural lenses. We're all seeing the same world. But notice that, let's say that's me. I'm perceiving the real world directly. I'm not perceiving a representation of the world. And I find myself in the world. The world's not in my head. That whole thing of the world, of experience being in something is, as I said, an example of the historical fallacy. Okay. Here we have, the only thing I need to convey from this is the unity of witness, and in the projected percept, the diverse appearances that we find. Okay. And individuality forms in the process. It doesn't start, it's not at the beginning of the process, it arises out of the process. So we arise along with the world that we perceive. Now, I said before that the reason that the external world was posited was to provide a common cause of Linda and John's experience, to account for the fact that of the aspects that are shared. Okay, that's what it comes from. That we did need to have a common cause. When they tried to do away with the external world before, they didn't think in terms of a process or an evolution. Those ideas actually preceded thinking like that. They thought about it like in your mind, kind of like Hegel or something like that. And they ended up in solipsism, the idea that the world's all in your mind. Like if you do away with him, then his whole world's in his head. That's the solipsism I was talking about. But in my system, you don't need that, which is problem producing, because you have a common cause, but the common cause is a single witness or a single source that's psychological. And that's why each person perceives the same world. As I point out here again, here you perceive a mere representation of the actual world, and here you see the actual world. There's only one world. You're looking at it. When you pick up something, you feel it, it's hot, it's cold. That's the world. That's the material world. That's matter. This theory doesn't say there's no matter. It just explains how it arises and its nature, which is apparent. Okay? But it has, because it forms through natural laws, it is persistent and steady. Now, I talked about the fact that the order of the lenses in which they evolve is not, oh shoot, that's okay. It's not random or ad hoc, that it's necessary, that for lenses that arise, certain ones are necessary preconditions of them, so have to arisen first. So the order is not just some ad hoc thought up thing. I'm going to talk about the intuitions that are used to know this, okay, in our next talk. Our next talk is going to be about intuition and its place in all this. So I quickly mentioned Galileo, but I'll say it again. Galileo, he did an experiment, and Aristotle had believed that if you dropped two objects, one was heavier than the other, the heavier one would move faster than the lighter one. Galileo proved that they fall at the same rate because they're both obeying the law of gravity, which gives them a constant speed. This is famously tested on the moon in the 70s, where they dropped a feather and a brick or something, and they both hit the ground at the same time because there's no air on the moon. So they proved Galileo right. Anyway, but Galileo's attempt to do this, to prove this, to prove that gravity was constant for all objects, this experiment. And I don't remember whether this experiment took place this way. I've also heard that the way he did this was he rolled balls down an incline. But anyway, famously, at least the legend is that Galileo dropped two balls of different weights and they fell at the same rate. Now, my point in all this is that gravity is a natural law. It's kind of a paradigm example of a natural law. There's lots of natural laws. But gravity's a nice one because when we see it operating in our everyday life. But anyway, in order to have natural laws, gravity, you have to have space and time. You have to have space and time because gravity is a measure of the ratio of space and time when something is dropped. These balls, we measure their action in terms of a certain degree of space, which is from here to here, in a certain amount of time. That's what the speed of a motion is a ratio between space and time. So you have to have space and time before you have natural laws. You also, time must come before space two people have argued otherwise, and my daughter and I have talked about this, and she can see why they don't understand. But time has to be the first in a sequence of evolving lenses. The reason is that sequence itself is a time thing, okay? You remove time, you can't have sequence. So there can't be any thing prior to time. Doesn't make any sense. Imagine there's no time, and I'm going, yes, well, something will be coming along quite soon, quite soon. No, you gotta have time in order for there to be sequence at all. So that's why. And it can also be explained, I won't now, that time is also a factor of there being space. But this is good enough. Okay, let's see if there's anything else. That's it. That's all I wanted to add. I hope I haven't made things less clear. I hope this helped. Anyway, helps my conscience to know that I covered those points. Thank you very much. See you next week, and we'll be talking about intuitions and other things probably, but I've got to get to the subject of intuitions, and it's going to be interesting. All right, thank you very much.